What's up everybody, Brian Tong here, and this is my iPad Air 4 review. And the iPad has been one of my favorite Apple products of all time since day one. And after all these years of refinement, it's now just really hard to find any major flaws with it. The iPad Air 4 is Apple's latest entry, and it's really their most stylish one with all these colors. I mean, look at this. I love this green. And it might be as perfect of an iPad from software to hardware and a won't break your bank price point all in one package. And I know I don't say that about many products, but I'm gonna stand by it and your eye rolls. Now, I'm really the ultimate fan of the iPad line. I've never been bashful about that, and I currently own the 12.9-inch 2018 iPad Pro, not the 2021, because the rear camera and LiDAR sensor really didn't do much for me for just how I use the iPad, because I consume a lot of content on it. I'm a big comic book freak, I read digital magazines, and I wanna be able to do work when I have to on it. Now this iPad Air 4 was provided to me for review by Apple, but you know what, you can still bet I'm gonna be just as fair about it. But right when they announced it, I was already saying, yeah, that's gonna be the iPad to get. So I'm gonna break down some of the specs and I'll cover what stands out for me. I'm also gonna use the 2020 11-inch iPad Pro versus this new 10.9-inch iPad Air 4 as a comparison, because I'm sure that's what a lot of you are potentially deciding on if you're looking for an upgrade. Now, the first thing about the iPad Air that you'll notice is that this is an iPad that really adopts the design language from the iPad Pro. It instantly just makes it more attractive, and it doesn't feel like an iPad design from, let's say, 5+ years ago, with this overall, slimmer bezel around the edges and then no large forehead or chin on it. And when you look at it and when you feel it, I think this instantly feels like it's part of the iPad Pro family, even if it's not. Plus, you gotta love the new colors. Green is my jam. But this is just a big win to bring this design to the Air. And even if the Air 4 screen is slightly smaller at 10.9 inches versus the 11 of the iPad Pro, you're just not gonna notice it at all. So let's just call it, 11 inches, but the size, this is really the perfect sweet spot for a tablet. Both the Air 4 and the Pro fit all the same cases, whether it's Apple's Magic Keyboard case or even its third-party Logitech Folio Touch case. And their displays, they have the same exact pixel per inch density, so you're not losing any image quality or detail at all from an iPad Pro to an iPad Air 4. Now the Pro can get a little brighter at 600 nits versus the 500 nits of this Air 4. It's a subtle difference, but not a deal breaker. The biggest screen differentiation though is the Pro motion display. Now the Pro, it has a 120 Hz refresh rate for that just like buttery smooth goodness when you're swiping between home screens, scrolling up and down. Basically everywhere you use it, it's smoother, but the Air here does not. So if you've never had a Pro, you're not gonna miss this. I love 120 Hz, I absolutely love it, and I would miss it, but most of you won't. And if you're not trying to spend the most money you can on a tablet, I think you're gonna be just fine with the refresh rate it has, because the screen, it looks great, but outside of this Apple bubble, we have Samsung's Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, and which is still for me the benchmark for really the best looking display on any tablet that I've seen this year. It's got a Super AMOLED with a 120 Hz refresh rate, and it's gorgeous, even besting the iPad Pro. Now let's get back to the iPads here, and the other big change on this Air is that it brings back Touch ID, and it's now integrated into the power button here at the top corner. And I'm a huge fan of this move until using a fingerprint scanner inside of the screen can actually be as fast and accurate, but we're still not there yet. Now Face ID, it still works pretty well, but not all the time. It's really the most convenient when you're making a purchase, but then you still have to double tap this power button to authorize a purchase. So for me, it's like, hey, let's just bring Touch ID back in the fold. You do it all on the power button anyways, and this has always been faster and more reliable for me, and I'm all about bringing it back. And maybe this is a glimpse into Apple's plans across other products as well. I'm crossing my fingers. I wouldn't even mind if they used both Touch ID and Face ID, just knowing how invested Apple is with Face ID, because it's not going away anytime soon. But this, I'm Touch ID over Face ID. I've always been. So Apple, maybe you could bring it to the iPhone while you're at it. All right, let's now just take a look at a comparison of some of the other features, just so you have everything that you need to know here. And the engine that makes this iPad Air 4 go is the latest A14 Bionic chip. It's found in the iPhone 12 lineup. And this chip is just a beast and one of the fastest performing on a mobile device at the moment. Now the iPad Pro, this is using an A12Z, and the main difference is that it has 8 cores while the A14 has 6 cores. They perform about the same in single core performance, but with the Pro, it gets a boost in multi-core score performance because it has more cores. But bottom line, this iPad Air 4 is more than fast enough. The other thing to note here is cameras. Now, cameras aren't important for me on the iPad, but I know how many iPad photographers are out there. Like, I've seen you out ruining concert experiences. Give me like one of these, like holding up high up here. You do it in public outings, but the reality is that you still outnumber me hundreds of thousands to one, and you will come back when those experiences return. Now, the iPad Air has the same exact wide camera with an f1.8 aperture as the iPad Pro, so you're not gonna miss anything there. Both iPads, they're shooting the same quality photos and 4K video recording at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. The Air, though, you can see it only has one lens here, so the Air is missing the ultra-wide camera with an f2.4 aperture, and the Pro, that has it. So the Pro can take those ultra-wide angle shots and ultra-wide video at 60 frames per second. This Air 4 can't. There's also, pretty obvious here, no LiDAR sensor for augmented reality on the Air, but I haven't used LiDAR on the 2020 iPad Pro after, they made the upgrade. I reviewed it. I've really never used it since then, or really even on my iPhone 12 Pro on a regular basis, because Apple still needs to show us why it's crucial that LiDAR is kind of part of this equation right now. But really the camera stuff, it just isn't that high on my list of important features on the iPad. It might be for you, and if this is your primary creative device, I get that. So I'm not dismissing it, but it's just not a feature that matters for me. Either way, the Air 4 camera is still gonna be great. Audio-wise, you will see there's kind of 4 speaker points, but the Air has 2 speaker audio, while the Pro gives you better sound with 4 speaker audio to kind of fill out a little bit more. Both the Air and the Pro support the latest 2nd generation Apple Pencil, so you're good there as well. And then both iPads support Apple's Magic Keyboard or their Smart Keyboard Folio. I also have this down here. Logitech, they sent me their Folio Touch for this review, which just has kind of like this softer fabric coating, so it makes it a little nicer to hold, and I can just pop in the iPad just like this, and you can see here it has its own like kickstand. Now it works great kind of on these surfaces. You can use it as a keyboard stand, and they work directly with Apple on this case. I think it is though really good on tables because you got this flat surface, but if you see here, kind of like some of the other cases, it's a little more wobbly if you're gonna put it on your lap because of this folding joint. So really depending on if you wanna use this one or if you wanna go with Apple's Magic Keyboard, which is kind of like really the solid, sturdy, it's a little different in how it's used, but whether you're on your lap or right here, it's gonna be a solid experience. Now, the other thing is that this one's gonna be a lot more expensive for that sturdier base and then this hinge here. This is $299 for the Magic Keyboard case for the iPad Air 4, while the Logitech Folio Touch is $159. So you can just kind of check out my in-depth review of Apple's Magic Keyboard that really transforms the iPad and just see if it makes sense for you. Microsoft also recently launched new support for its Office suite on iPadOS. And if you're using a case with a mouse and a trackpad like those two have, you can now highlight text in Microsoft Word. You can select a range of cells in Excel, and then you can move and resize images in PowerPoint. I know that this sounds like really common if you have a computer or you're on a laptop, but making this kind of functionality for an iPad app really just helps evolve this product into more of like a hybrid device, and that didn't exist before. Now also, when I talk about the iPad, we talked about a lot of the hardware. iPadOS is extremely polished. To me, it's the easiest tablet OS to use, and it brings the most apps on any tablet platform. But then there's really like 2 things. They're small and subtle, but there's 2 things that they can do to make this experience better. A lot of us have updated to iOS 14, but Apple give us the ability to use widgets in iOS 14 on all home screens for the iPad, just like you do for the iPhone, because there is no reason to prevent us from doing this, but Apple, for some reason, they decided that we could only have it when we swipe on the sidebar of an iPad. This is an easy fix, Apple. It's really just up to you to do it. And also, I've been saying this since basically the very first iPad Pro, and I will say it again. Apple needs to bring their own pro-level apps that take full advantage of the iPad's processing power, like Final Cut Pro or Logic. We've seen, Adobe, they're working on getting more of their Creative Suite to the iPad as touchscreen apps, but Apple, just do it already. You control hardware, you control software. This is kind of easy for you to handle. Even Adobe is working on getting more of their Creative Suite to the iPad as a touchscreen app. And I would also wholeheartedly recommend that you guys and gals check out Affinity Photo, is one of the best photo editing apps out there as well on here. But really, I'm just asking for all the high-end creative apps from Apple, a company that makes the hardware and software, to get an iPad version out like I do every year. The iPad Air 4 has a maximum storage capacity of 256 gigs, while the iPad Pro can get up to 1 terabyte, because I guess that's another thing that makes it Pro. But here's the biggest difference: $200. The 10.9-inch iPad Air starts at $599. The 11-inch iPad Pro starts at $799. So for $200 less, you're getting a screen without ProMotion. You get no Face ID. There's no LiDAR sensor here for augmented reality, and a processor that is performed pretty much the same when you're comparing the Pro to the iPad Air 4. Like, are those features critical to an enjoyable iPad experience? Because I don't think they are. And the biggest thing to me is that they are using the latest A14 chip. People have iPads that they haven't upgraded from 5 years ago or even more. So what you're getting here is a chip in here that's gonna last the iPad Air 4 for years to come. And I know I might have made you cringe earlier when I said that the iPad is a near perfect product, but think about everything I've said, because it is. I mean, Apple probably wishes people were buying iPads more often, but it's really because they made a product that's been so good for so long and still is. The new iPad Air 4 is their best all-around iPad they've made, with a compelling price and really just all the features you need. If you're in the market for a tablet, whether you're inside or outside the Apple ecosystem, this iPad Air 4 should absolutely be the first one you look at, and it might be the only one you do.